Oh,
You okay?
top of the class, mate.
Oh, hey.
Consistent. Late again.
Good to see you.
All good?
Yeah. Last time.
journey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last time I saw you, I was dropping you off in a taxi in Athens.
But we won't talk about that.
We won't talk about that. No,
between us.
Yeah.
We start up just to get warmed up. when was the first time you both met?
I think I was
We were at Swansea.
I was at Swansea. Was it Swansea Cardiff game?
I think you were on the staff on one of the young players at Swansea.
Okay, apprentice. I remember you. You remember at Swansea at the Vetch and the North Bank, you had to go up the
Up the gantry.
up the gantry, which was it looked like a.
Yeah. That was a challenge.
You was gambling with your life every time you came down to
yeah.
do some commentating. But that's what I remember seeing you, and I
Yeah.
remember seeing you on the TV talking nonsense.
Yeah. And
That's 1987. I think.
Yeah. 'Cause I can remember watching you and thinking he'll never make it. But
I know. How did he get
how
through?
did he get? There's a chance for us all then. No. But I can remember that because, they were tough times, weren't they?
Yeah.
It was fourth division and
Yeah.
that and the other. You never saw what was coming, and the Vetch was an intimidating place to go. But they were good times because you felt, we're back against the wall. Welsh football, what can we do to improve it? And there were characters around it, who the managers were at the time, and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Different to what it is now. And there was access. You could walk into the Vetch, you could walk into the changing room. I can remember seeing players there and just kind of have a chat with you, this, that, and the other. That doesn't happen now, does
Well,
it?
no, I think in them days, because the reason for that was in them days, the people on the pitch, on the grass, the players, and the salaries they earned were this more like the salaries of the people that were in the stands watching them play. So the connection was there. Now, of course, especially now the higher you go, and it's been like for some time, the people on the pitch and the salaries they earn compared to the people who come to watch them play, it's not the workman's game anymore. It used to be, and it's not anymore. So now they're poles apart. I mean, I do remember those days where it was. I'd be at the game, I'd be playing for Swansea, and I used to see loads of people I grew up with in the stand watching the game, shouting abuse at me. But no, you had that real connection then. It was more, that was a completely different game.
I remember, from a Welsh perspective, and obviously you followed your career, with the clubs you went to play for, Blackburn, Fulham, etc., and as a manager. But as a player, I think what was great then, when with Wales, with the under-21s, always played the night before the senior team. And the media always used to travel with the team, stay in the same hotel. And then actually, if the opportunity arose, would go out with the team in the evening after the game or whatever. So you got to know, when I'm thinking of people like yourself, Gary Speed, Giggsy after, all got to know you because of the under-21s.
Yes.
And I think then that carried on into the senior team, which helped us then when you were the manager, became the manager. We always something to relate to. But under-21s at the time, I suppose it was completely different, or the setup in international football was completely different, even with Wales, to when you were manager, to what it is now when you started out, I suppose.
I remember playing for the under-21s, and we'd always, normally then we'd have normally, it happened a few times where we would play against the first team, just because Terry was the manager then, and he just wanted to go through a structure of whatever they were going to do with the first team, and it was I remember the excitement. My God, we're going to be on the pitch with Sparky and Dino and Neville South or Ian Rush, and then we'd have like a warm-up game with them. And then you're right, then we'd play our game always the day before. Because I remember when I think we played at Merthyr, we played somewhere. And directly after, Speed's got a call because someone had pulled out of the first team. I remember Speed saying, he said, Cookie, I just been called, Terry Hollis called me out when we were like celebrating for him. He was the first one to get through, because he was going to go with the first team. And that was fantastic. I only remember being as the coach. I remember quite a few of the lads speaking Welsh. At lunch, dinner, it was normal. When I was a player, I didn't hear it so much. I didn't hear any of the lads speaking Welsh, not because of any other reason. It's just that everybody was speaking English, I think, and times change, society changes. I remember when I was a coach, when I was a manager, I remember the lads speaking in Welsh at breakfast and having a laugh and a joke. And I remember thinking how much it had changed, you know.
Yeah.
I think largely down to yourself, IG, was certainly when I first arrived, and the history of Wales, and you were always talking to the boys about the history of Wales, and they were more aware, I think, of the Welsh language as well.
Yeah, because if I remember when I was in the media, to be honest, I didn't think about things like that. You always thought about, you just wanted the team to win, and you weren't in a position to do anything about it. Plus, you used to broadcast in English or Welsh, whatever, so and I think with the anthem and stuff, you know what it was like. Because of 2016, we've had that relative success since, but there were real bad periods in Welsh football, where 5,000-6,000 in a stadium. And I think everybody felt, you know, you're not going to sing an anthem with the cameras and the mics right up to you, and there's nobody in the crowd singing anyhow. It was like there was no atmosphere within the stadium to create that or anything like that. And I can remember, you know, I never used to think about it in terms of when I first started out, people like Di Davis, then there was Malcolm Allen and Iwan Roberts, so you got your interviews in Welsh, etc. And then obviously there was the young Aaron Ramsey, Joe Allen, it all came in. I think it was just in that period where joining the association, I can remember Rheolwr Hughes just saying, look, you know, we need to get this identity out there, and we need to get more of a connection between the players and the fans and the association on a regular basis, not just, if we're doing well, it looks after itself. What happens when we're not doing so well? Correct. And of course, we started at a point where it was difficult because of what had happened with Gary and everything like that. And a few of the results like Serbia. So our backs were to the wall at the time. So it was about creating an identity where people would think, we can understand who these lads are representing at the time, you know?
No, that's right. I remember that. And I think the reason for the lack of support, if you like, from the Welsh public was we'd promised so much so many times and like fell at the last hurdle. So we do well, we get to the last game and we couldn't get over the line. And then we'd have a bad campaign, 2 bad campaigns, and then the interest had gone. The atmosphere was poor. And that's why there was like 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. Nobody was singing the national anthem. And I remember all that, but we couldn't blame the Welsh public because we'd promised so much and we never delivered. And then we'd always do well at the end of a campaign, 2 or 3 games, and everybody get excited. And then 3 games into the next campaign, we'd lost and it was all over. And I think that the Welsh people just got tired of that, of us promising and never delivering.
I think in sport, my own view, and you'd know this, growing up in South Wales, people used to associate success in sport in Wales and the expression of Welshness with rugby. Full stadium. You could always, the players and the fans singing the anthem passionately. And that was seen as... I
used to be jealous of that. I used to look at that and I think, why can't we produce that? I watched the Welsh rugby boys, and then it was Cardiff Arms Park back in that day, absolutely packed to the rafters. And the atmosphere, it was smaller than when they changed it, and it was the Principalities did. It was smaller, but it's still, the atmosphere was incredible, and the rugby games were just poor. And I remember watching, and I was jealous of what they were producing, how they were making the country feel, and I thought we've never ever done that. You know?
They could lose 3 games and still fill it. We'd lose 3 games. And the sport would disappear.
But because of in the history of Welsh rugby, they'd produced, hadn't they? They produced some top moments, some amazing games, incredible, like best players in rugby, you know, through the history, and they produced all that. So they had that behind them, and we didn't have it because we'd been to 1958 to the tournament, and that was it really. So we needed to try to create a trust as well. Also, I think that the country thought, no, these guys can do something. You know?
Going back to when you started then as the manager, came in at a very difficult time. There's no doubt about that, and results were not the best. Serbia, 6-1, although then you beat Scotland and etc.
Yeah.
But it was a very mixed start, and you
Yeah.
felt that. I
Yeah.
know you felt that massively. I remember sitting down. There was a guy called Pete Barnes who worked with us at the time. Great guy, Pete. First guy who came in the department with me, and Pete was superb. And we sat down, and we'd always had this thing, like, get Chris out there doing interviews on television and this, that, and the other, get him to tell the public what he's trying to do. And it always used to end with negative questions for you.
Yeah.
And I knew it was getting to you. So we sat down, Pete and me, and we'd been to a couple of Q&As. We'd done one which had gone quite well in Tom Pentre, but when we were doing the ones in the city, Swansea or Cardiff, it wasn't working. And Pete, we thought, right, we've got to create the message here. We've got to control that message. And there's two ways we can do this. We can get people to know Chris as a person and what he's trying to do, but we can also get Chris to know Wales.
Yeah.
So let's go out to areas where you would never expect to see a national manager.
Yeah.
Carnarvon, Porthmadog, we went everywhere, you
Yeah.
know, and we were going together, chatting and everything. And it changed, didn't it? It
did.
changed. The perception changed.
Yeah.
Even if the results were slowly improving.
Yeah.
But even when we weren't doing so well,
Yeah.
you must have felt that the
did.
fans actually, they have taken to me in some way.
It was like invisible magic, wasn't it? It was like you can't see it, but you feel the atmosphere changing.
Yeah.
And Pete Barnes, he was responsible for Together Stronger.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which wasn't just a slogan because it looked good. It was actually, I think as well, because we were in such a difficult spot. We were still mourning speeds. We were all still like depressed because of speeds. The results weren't good. So we were like trying to climb as best we could. And then that slogan, Together Stronger, it was, we actually lived that, you know. It wasn't just, it looks good and we can use that. It was real, because in them days, I remember coming into the offices, I knew everybody. 30 or 40 people that worked there. I knew everybody.
Used to buy everyone donuts from Greg.
Used to buy them cakes and donuts, get them on my side. And we'd have a cup of tea and a chat, and it was a real family atmosphere. It really was. And so I remember we were losing, and there was a lot of negativity surrounding me, more than really the Welsh team. There was a lot of negativity surrounding me because the results weren't good. And I remember you took me to Porthmadog, and I was nervous because I thought it wasn't about having difficult questions. I was used to it by then. I was tired of this. I was tired, I think, of disappointing people. I said earlier, when you represent your country, it's one thing when you're losing at a club where there's 10, 20, 30,000 people disappointed with you. If you've got 3 million people disappointed with you, it's a bit different. But we got to Porthmadog, and I remember leaving Porthmadog feeling completely different. I was completely different to the guy that arrived at Porthmadog, because it was packed in the hall where we were. The fans were absolutely brilliant. The people there were brilliant. And that kind of gave me a bit of confidence after that. And I had a bit of a spring in my step after that. Although it didn't turn immediately, I started to feel something. And that was a big night in Porthmadog for me.
Because I can remember when we went there, and I remember people coming up, a lot of the fans, they've been following us for years, in good times, bad times and whatever, and they were all coming up and talking to Welsh to me. And you said, God, gee, everybody's speaking Welsh to you here. And I was explaining, we'd explained about the background to the area. I can remember one in Carnarvon as well, right? Which I remember going there, we were sat in the car park at the Oval, hammering down with rain. And I said to you before we went in, I think we just beaten Macedonia and drawn with Belgium. I said, you might have a tough night here tonight. He said, what do you mean? I said, this is hardcore Wales, language, culture, history, everything. And a lot of them would have been calling for your head in Serbia after the 6-1. All right. And as I said that, this woman walked out with a huge bowl of curry. And you said, I'm starving. So we went in and we sat down. You might not remember this. And we sat in the front before the event. And she came up to you and said, Mr. Coleman said, do you like some curry? He said, no. He said, let everybody else have it first. I'll have it if there's any left. I turned to you, I said, I thought you were starving. Yeah, he said, IG, I am, but you never know what they put in it. And I said, they might not like you as a manager. They're not going to kill you, mate.
I thought you was a plant.
But again, at the end of that night, people were up on their chairs cheering, came up to you and said the Belgium, we'd drawn 1-1 with a very young team. Rambo scored late on, didn't he?
Did, yeah.
Harry Wilson came on.
That was Harry's first game,
cap,
yeah.
And they were all saying, you know, one of the best nights of their lives. So you sensed things were turning.
It gave me a bit of confidence as well, those nights. And I think because people came up to me about Harry, and they said, what a fantastic move. Because I didn't know whether I was going to be there or not. We hadn't negotiated a new contract. There was negativity. Maybe it's time for us to change. And is he going to stay? And so traveling like around the country, going to places where I'd never been. I knew of them, but I'd never been there. And because we were struggling for results predominantly, but then meeting the real hardcore Welsh fans who travel everywhere. Doesn't matter how we were doing in the campaign, and they'd been doing it for years, you know. And getting to speak with them, and I had a totally different outlook on everything, and my expectation of what that relationship was going to be like with them, compared to how it really was when I'd met them and what they had to say. I got a big confidence after meeting them, because they were very honest, but very genuine, very supportive. And you said earlier, IG, it was important for us to tell them what we wanted to do and what we had planned going forward. And it was a huge, for me, it was a big moment for me. Just give me a bit of confidence, because when you're getting criticised from no matter what angle you look at it, you're getting criticised. They give me that little bit of support when I really needed it, you know. So it was great as well when we did qualify against Bosnia. I saw a lot of the people at these dinners. I saw them. I recognised their faces, and they were crying. You know, obviously celebrating. That was a special moment.
Yeah. Because when you look at the map of Wales, I don't think there's an area that we didn't. We used to do 2 or 3 a month at times in between matches when it was a long period. But you know, you go Denbigh right along the North Wales coast, down Aberystwyth right down Hadford West, and you
Cardigan,
come back
and
Cardigan and Carmarthen everywhere, and Llanelli, and we used to do big venues, small venues, whatever, and it was packed. But as a person, I would like to mention when we're talking about Welshness and Welsh identity, who was a massive supporter of yourself, was Rheolwr Hughes. Was president at the time. And funny enough, when people talk about Welsh identity and Welshness, he was instrumental in, I suppose, persuading me to join the FAW, and he said about increasing Welsh identity, whether it was language, culture, whatever. And at the time, he was president, and the players, the Welsh speakers like Aaron and Joe were starting to come through, so it was a presence. But I can remember we were in Nice. I don't know if you remember this. We just learned the draw for the 2016 tournament, and it was about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And we were all in quite a good mood, because we knew we've got a chance here, we were all thinking, and things had started to turn. It was yourself, me, Osian Roberts and Mark Evans. We sat down and Trevor said, come on lads, tell me what's wrong with Welsh football. And how long was it? 3-4 hours later, he just sat there and we bombarded him with everything, didn't we?
I remember. I remember him at the end of the night, he was like this, because we just said, and another thing, Trev, this needs to change, and another thing. And I remember him thinking, Christ, I'm sorry I asked that question, but I would agree with you totally. He was fantastic. He was a great president for me, because at the time I was struggling. And he was super supportive. He always used to say to me, close your ears, smile, it'll turn for us, keep going. Because I knew Trevor, I'd known Trevor since probably I was 15, 16, and I started playing for the under-18s, and he'd always be there at the games. That's when I first really met Trevor. So my history with him went back a long way, but that was a great night in Nice, where poor old Trevor, I think when I did arrive, first and foremost, because Speed has started to try to get for the players in the squad to be more like a Premier League setup compared to what it had been before. And So that was, you know, for me to come into that, it was, I wouldn't say eye-opening, but I wasn't expecting it to be so as professional as it was. It was really good. But of course, we're still trying to, you know, there was this, it wasn't like we were selling out stadiums then. We were just, there was just, even when Speeds was there. When I was talking to people about what Speeds had been doing, you know, he was travelling around with you, travelling around Wales, you talking to the Eisteddfod. Yeah. And I remember Speeds calling me when he'd said I was having a chat with him, and I know, what are you up to? He said, I'm going to the Eisteddfod with, and I said, going to the Eisteddfod, because it was unusual, you know. And then I ended up there with you myself. But I could see, and I did feel when I was there, I felt that, I'm not going to say they're big boots to fill, because it was impossible to fill them boots. I never tried to anyway, because I'm not that stupid. But yeah, because he'd started to change everything around. He had the team playing how he wanted to play. They'd had some good results. And even before that, he'd been the captain of Wales, a great servant, you know. So I did feel when I arrived, I felt the enormity of first of all, I underestimated how difficult it was going to be. And I felt like there was a huge shadow over me, because he wasn't there anymore, obviously. Had I taken a job where he was at Everton or somewhere else working, it would have been a lot different, you know, because he would have been probably my biggest fan and supporting me on the phone talking, because we were fairly close, you know, we'd known each other since we were 10. But I definitely felt that pressure of trying to pick up where he'd left off, and I clearly wasn't doing that on the pitch with the results. So I think it took me like 18 months, maybe 2 years to just go off in my own direction and have confidence in my own way. I remember you telling me, my wife telling me, you've got to have one more campaign and do everything how you want to do it. But it took me a long time of feeling like I'm letting Wales down, I'm letting Speeds down. I'm not like pushing it on, because he started really good. I remember having that feeling of negativity, and I can't do it. And that took me some time, you know, to turn that round.
Because I remember after the Serbia game, I'd heard Michael Laudrup at Swansea on the day after saying about the loneliness of an international. Yeah. He'd been an assistant, but you couldn't get the players together for a few. Yeah. You came round that night, had a meal, a bottle of wine, and it was for you as a person more than anything, because you were in Sully by yourself at the time, wasn't it? You know, and just in terms of that you weren't isolated, because it was difficult, because you wouldn't have many people around you able to talk to you, because everybody goes back to their clubs. Correct. Doesn't it? Quite be a lonely place at that time, wasn't it? Really?
Well, it was lucky that you lived up the road, really, and where I was in Sully, and you lived up the road, and that was an important moment as well. I do that when we had a chat and we had a bit of dinner. I was with you and Beth, and we had a good conversation that night, because I thought it's an impossible situation for me. And it's going to need somebody else, and it may take another 2-3 campaigns, because everybody was talking about this good young Welsh team we had, the golden generation, and I used to fight against that, mainly to try to protect the boys, because of the pressure on them to say they're the golden generation. And I used to say, well, we need to prove that we're the golden generation, or they need to prove that. And I remember like speaking to you at length about everything. And it's amazing what time, when you take it, when you're in the middle of it, the hardest thing to do is step away from it, take a deep breath. Because sometimes you can hold on too tight to something, you know. It's sometimes when you let it go and just relax a little bit, and then things start to grow, you know. And directly after that period, after that first campaign, towards the end of the campaign, you're right, Macedonia, Belgium, you just felt that just the whole atmosphere was changing. We were like coming out of a darkness, if you like, and we were going on to new pastures, and you could just feel it changing and turning around.
I mentioned something in the start of the next campaign, and we're taking on to the campaign, and we're talking about Welshness and identity and history and culture. something that, although I knew you well, I didn't really, wasn't sure if we would be able to do it. We went out to Belgium on a recce before the Belgium game. Mark Evans was there. And I remember Mark and myself having a chat with you and saying, you know, when we play in Belgium in November, it's 100 years since the start of the First World War. And we're there that weekend. We think we should do something. And you said, well, what do you think? And Mark and I were discussing, and we said, well, there's a Welsh memorial in a place called Langemark, and there's the poet Ian Gwyn who's buried there, and it'd be quite poignant and significant if we went out there. And I remember you saying, well, let's do a recce while we're out. So we got the guy from the Belgian FA to take us out there, and we walked around and we paid our respects. And I remember we went across the road, there was a small cafe, and asked, you know, if we were to do this, could they provide food? So I remember Mark and myself saying to you, you know, what do you think? He said, we've got to do it. I thought, wow, I hadn't expected, because it was an hour over an hour away. Yeah? And I said, what if we get hammered? Because they were a good team at the time, although we won, started well. And he said, no, this is important. And we
remember it,
did it. And if I'm honest, I thought you might say, oh, I'd love to do it, IG, but it's an hour and a half after. But we stayed the extra night in Belgium. Yeah.
I just felt it was the right time to do that because of what we were trying to promote and what we were trying to introduce to the players and the staff about the whole ethos of being Welsh and Welshness, if you like. And as soon as you told me all about what you had planned and the history of it, I thought, no, and I thought the boys need to be here. They need to see this. Of course, the heroes, the true heroes of the country who were, you know, lost their lives, you know. I thought, no, the boys need to see this. They need to be here to see it, to understand. It's one thing, because you always have that feeling as a player when you're going into another country, you're going into someone else's country, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, you know, you don't know what to expect. But all we're doing is playing a game of football. These men and women they're going to fight, you know, and a lot of them, they didn't even come back, and they were so young. I thought it was important for our lads to understand that. And I think when we took them there, again, those little moments, it's not always on the pitch that everything comes together in a positive way. Sometimes there's moments off the pitch. I think that was a moment also, because once they understood the history of it and why we were there wasn't one person that said, why are we doing this? They're all on board. They wanted to come, pay their respects, and I just thought it was the right thing for us all to do, you know.
Did you think we played it low key? We went there, we just filmed it with Nathan from Tiny Media, and that was it. And we didn't make a big fuss of it, but obviously we put it out that we'd been and stuff like that. Do you think that helped as well with fans in terms of seeing a group of people led by yourself, a group of young players here, and bearing in mind you had superstars like Bale who was at Real Madrid, didn't have to be there or what have you, that gave that impression these are genuine lads who actually care about what they're doing and who they're representing? Yeah,
and I wanted, because sometimes the public's perception of a person, a player, is one thing, and the reality is another. And because he's perfect, Bale, because, you know, he's a world superstar, one of the best players in the world, the best Welsh player there's ever been. And if he didn't buy in to what we were doing, and it had to be natural because you can't force it. No. It had to be natural. Yeah. And thank God he never ever complained about anything like that. He's there, nothing, asking questions. Wanted to be there because he wanted to be a part of whatever was happening, you know. And so it was easy. We didn't have to force anything.
Because I think it was genuine, because even after the 2016, remember you took them to Aberfan.
Yeah.
Morning after we'd played Georgia.
Yeah.
And that was very poignant, wasn't it? You know, when you're thinking there's history on your doorstep here because it was 20 minutes away from whatever. Yeah. And I can remember going, and all the lads have been looking at their phones to see images of Aberfan and spoken with their parents who said this was our 9/11, what had happened in 1966. Yeah. And so I think they were quite genuine about wanting to understand about the country, bearing in mind that not all of them were actually born in Wales. You know,
no, that's right. I've got a lot of good friends in Greece from working there for so long, and the last time I was in Greece, I told them the story about Aberfan, and you know, they couldn't believe, you know, what had happened. And
I think part of it, of going there, was to learn about Welsh history. I think that's relevant for the whole population, not just the team. But I think, you know, they could lead by example, but also the sense of sacrifice and what had happened with these youngsters, and they appreciated how lucky they were. And obviously it doesn't impact on results on the pitch. But I think when they were doing interviews and stuff like that, and they talk about Aberfan or they talk about the visit in Belgium, it's quite powerful, and you know, it's a strong story to give out, isn't it? Really?
It was nice as well when we were in Aberfan, because obviously when we pulled up, we were on the Welsh bus, and people knew we were arriving, and we were talking to the local people there. That's important as well, you know. And it was, you know, everybody was happy to see us, and just we were having a chat about Aberfan, about the village and about the town, and you know, people they like to talk about where they're from. They like to talk to you about their history of their village or their town, of where they're from. And I think with our boys, like I said earlier, they were genuine in when they were speaking to people and asking questions. And that's, you know, so when the results are good on the pitch and you've got that connection off it, there's, you know, I don't think there's it doesn't really get much better than that.
If I can ask you about the anthem. You've played when maybe there were more players on the pitch than in the crowd at the Millennium Stadium sometimes, when it looked very empty. You've played when it was full. But then when you became manager, in that golden period when I think things changed after the Andorra game, when we played Bosnia home 30,000 and we played Cyprus, and the anthem became part of it, didn't it? And by the time we got to France, it was a massive thing. How did you feel stood on the side of the pitch, you know, for example, Bordeaux or whatever? I know you told the players not to feel emotional, but it was difficult not to. But when the anthem was being sung before matches now, compared to what it used to be like, what was it like standing there on the pitch before kick-off?
I'll tell you what was a big moment was, it wasn't the anthem before the game, it was the anthem after 75 minutes.
On the Belgium game, yeah.
We were 1-0 up against Belgium, and we were struggling. You know, we were playing really in our own penalty box with everybody, and the lads were dead on their feet, because it was a game in June, so the end of the season had come, and then they had the break, and they were always difficult games. And then Belgium were labelled the best team in the world, best international team in the world, unbelievable team. And the boys had given everything, and we were struggling. And then I didn't even know how it happened. From nowhere, we could hear the national anthem being sung, and everybody started singing it. And it was visible. You could see the boys on the pitch found another gear, found another 5%. And of course, we got it over the line. We got the result. That was a huge moment, because I never heard during the game. I'd never heard the national anthem being sung. Not with 15 minutes to go. I don't even know where that came from. That was a massive moment.
When you look back on that period now, 2016, and even after in terms of 2018, when we were unlucky not to qualify, but when you look back at that period in France, and maybe when we were there, we weren't aware of everything and the impact we were having on the country, in everything, not just the football, on everything we were doing. When you look back on that period now, and, you know, I'll be honest, it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you, in every sense, Chris. As a manager, on the pitch, off the pitch, you led by example, and you gave us the opportunity to bring it to life on and off the pitch. How do you feel about that now, when you think of what it did that summer to the country?
Next to my children, and my family, of course, my wife and my children, I think it's the biggest thing, the most proud, that nothing in football that I've ever done is not even in the same ballpark as that. And I think even if we hadn't got to the semi-final, just like I remember playing for Wales and not being a successful player for Wales. I had 30-odd caps, some good games, some bad games, but I remember just because I dreamt about playing for Wales and playing for Swansea when I was a kid. So all I wanted to do, play for Swansea City, because I was a Swansea boy, and play for Wales. And if anything came after that or around it, I would accept it, but it was my dream, you know. So then I done both. And And then I thought one day maybe when I was a manager, maybe I'd get the opportunity, maybe I won't, I don't know. But just to be the manager of Wales was my biggest. I remember feeling that pride and emotion. For us to experience what we did, truly I'm the luckiest man on the planet. Even if I'd gone on and won the Champions League, I don't think I would have got that same feeling as I did, especially when we come out for the Bordeaux game. I think about that every day since, and I think about every day in my life. When we come out, and I told everybody, don't get emotional. I'm getting emotional now. And I thought, to be and I was successful with Wales because I had a group of people around me who were really good. Yes, it was my idea that the structure of the team was me. Who played, who didn't play was me in that tournament. And all my time I accepted the criticism when we lost. And then when we won, I'm not bashful to say that, no, I take that responsibility also, because I take the bad end, but then when the good happens, I'm not going to say that's not me. Although some people like to dilute me and my work, they want to give it this way or that way. I say, no, I lost the first campaign, I lost the third campaign, I won the second campaign, and the tournament, what happened. And to be in front of all of that, I know I'm the luckiest man to be in that position. I'm a Welsh fan like everybody else now. I had my time, super lucky, I had my time. And I'm a Welsh fan watching the boys, hoping and praying, and every game we're going to win, we're going to get there again. To just be a part of that legacy, luckiest man in the world. At my lowest point, what I needed somebody to put their arm around me and say, it's going to be all right, don't worry, stay calm. And that's, I think, when someone does that, again, it has to be real, you can't pretend. And you feel you've got that, no matter how badly you do, and those people are going to be in your corner. And unfortunately for me now, I can't shake him off. I can't, he calls me up every day, autographs and all sorts, don't you, IG?
It's what he doesn't say is he used to ring me up night before the game, back 5 or back 3, IG. Do I play Balo or bring him
What
up?
do you think? What do you think, IG?
Shall I play Balo?
Should we put Balo in the pocket or put him out wide?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Fantastic. Right.
Disappointed that you haven't mentioned any bottles of red wine in all of this.
Keep those for next time.
Rheolwr.
Thank you so much for
I'm a-
this. Brilliant.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
Hey.
Pleasure.
Brilliant.
Pleasure. Pleasure.
No, he's the legend.
But listen,
I made
saying,
him.
Carol, he's saying that now you're here. If it was just me and him sat here, he'd say, he's the legend. And I swear to God.
If you walk down Winchester now, both of us, they'd all be going, who's that with IG? And I don't even live here.
Steve, this is the real IG.
This is the real.
It's coming out, Carol.
Oh.
This is him. It's the real IG there. Yeah.
No.
Who's that with IG? In Winchester.
Yeah.